we've got a community of about 60 or 70 brood bitches. We don't use all those. I keep more than we need, and we produce about 350 pups a year. And we bring them right through. We breed them, we rear them, and then we do what we call pre-training and getting them track ready. From there, they're about 16 or 18 months old, and we ship them out to trainers from there.
That's what you call the American model. You've obviously been around the world a bit to have a look at how it works in other countries. Is it to do with the logistics in Australia that you have to work that way?
No, 20 years ago, things were going very ordinary in Australia, and in Australia, the model is very similar to Ireland, where you'll have a few greyhounds, breed a few greyhounds, sell a few, race a few, bits and pieces of everything. But what happened is it got so bad over in Australia 20 years ago that my children were leaving school and they wanted to come into the business, and I couldn't grow the business big enough to accommodate them coming into it. So what I had to do is try and look for a model that would support a larger family group, and the American model supported that because you could get more dogs out racing all over the country at once.
And you obviously hold on to a lot of the dogs to put in training under your own name. And what percentage would you be selling on?
How many
would you sell? How many?
We don't sell many at all. We basically go through, race them all. Sell a few off as brood bitches and things like that when they're finished, but they'll usually filter through to some place and race for someone. If they come through our system and they're not quite good enough, then there'll be someone that'll buy them for a few dollars for racing at tracks like Broken Hill or Port Pirie in South Australia, really low sort of quality tracks, but the dogs are given a life and they're out there racing, you know.
So clearly, if you're going to have 200 dogs in racing, it must be financially viable. How does the system work so that it is viable?
Well, the prize money is a lot different in Australia, and our metropolitan meetings, they race for approximately $100,000 per meeting, and because of that, there's a lot better or a lot more viable on the return for your effort. But the typical race in Australia on your metropolitan race is about $5,000 for a win. The Melbourne Cup this year went to $350,000 to the winner. I think the whole race was worth $500,000. There are several races worth $200,000. There's a pile of races worth $100,000, $50,000. So the money on offer in Australia at the moment is top rate. Especially the hub is Victoria. That's the hub of greyhound racing at the moment in Victoria. Our race team it comprises of 200 dogs. We have approximately 10,000 starters a year, and of that 10,000 starters, they are generating about $500,000 per month.
Per month?
Per month.
And obviously, how does that system work? So where does the prize money come from?
Well, it comes from prize money.
Yeah, but where does that prize money come from? How is it in the system overall?
We have a different betting model for gambling in Australia to the rest of the world. We have an off-course betting system. And the off-course betting system is that you can sit in your lounge room and you can watch the races on your own television. You can bet with your phone. So we're able to, rather than just relying on the people that go to the track, we're able to access the whole population. And that it combines New Zealand now. So we're actually watching races in New Zealand, in Perth. So in the time difference there, you're probably looking at 4 or 5 hours time difference. So we've just about got wall-to-wall racing in our nation at the moment. And it's legislated that a percentage of the turnover must go back to that code of racing for prize money. And that's how the industry has become self-sufficient and pays the prize money that it does.
Well, the levels of prize money you're talking about are kind of similar to what we'd have in horse racing, which is obviously more interest here in Ireland. If you've been to a couple of tracks, you told me you've been to Clonmel and you've been to Harold's Cross, and you've seen the levels of prize money here. How could a model work here, or could the Australian model work here in Ireland?
I think it could, but it'd be a political decision. and I think that the government could probably change the industry from being an industry that they have to prop up financially to an industry that's self-sufficient and paying large prize money. But it'd be purely a political move. I think the powers to be here would have to go to Australia and have a look at the Australian model and see if they think it could work. And there'd be certainly people down there that would be more than willing to show them how our system works, and then it'd have to be up to them whether they introduce it or not.
Well, they have spoken in Ireland about having bags meetings, which are basically bookmaker supported meetings. They have spoken about it. They have them in England. Spoken about them here. It's like a poison chalice. The thought, the idea of it. Nobody wants to pick it up and say run with it, but because their fear is that what you said will happen. We'll have nobody going to the tracks. All of a sudden, we'll have redundant tracks, and we'll just have a system where it's going into the betting shops live. I just worry that us being such a small country and having such a small population, we're going to have to sell it beyond Ireland to really make it work.
Well, you might, and New South, or not New South Wales, but Australia now. Australia is selling their product all over the place. The corporates now, there's a racefields legislation now which states that any corporate that uses the field information, the form, has got to pay 1.5%, I think, of turnover or profit or whatever it is, back to that code of racing. So they're now generating income from new sources from that. And that's working out well. The drawback is, with our system, you do not get people on course. Over the last 20 or 30 years, unless it is a feature race, you'll get very few people on course. So the Melbourne Cup, etc., that's 350,000 to the winner, you'll get a packed house.
Yeah.
But your normal run-of-the-mill meeting, you won't. Everything's generated off course.
And does that mean that it's run at substandard tracks? So, I mean, obviously there's not going to spend a lot of money on the track and on the actual facilities on track if they're not going to expect to have anybody there.
No, none at all. What happens is the tracks in Victoria have all been maintained to a level now that they don't have to do any infrastructure for the next 20 years. They've been brought up to date for 20 years. But we don't need a large complex because we don't get the volume of people on course. We don't need a large complex, only a small venue, and all we're doing is beaming out the race that's going on. So the track and everything, it's a little bit like Hollywood, where you've got a front of a building and not much else. You've got the track, we beam the product out, and that's how we make it. So we only need a small grandstand, which is a lot cheaper to maintain and everything else. So we cut our overheads down, but still generate the money from off course.
So you've got 200 greyhounds in training at any one time. You had that here, you'd be talking about €60,000 a month plus expenses on top of that, whatever there might be, extra fees, vets fees and all that. What way does it work in Australia? Clearly that wouldn't be viable.
I'm not sure, to tell you the truth. With us, with our kennel, what I've got to do is I've got to generate sufficient income through prize money or sales, but at the moment through prize money, and then that'll come back to keep the kennel operation going. But our operation at the moment would probably cost us, in Australian dollars, $20,000 to $25,000 a week to operate.
And what would a trainer get there? Run-of-the-mill trainer, not the very top level. So what would a trainer get per week per greyhound?
A training fee.
Yeah.
Most of the better ones don't actually charge a training fee. They train them for 50% of what the dog earns. So what happens is you send the dog out to a trainer. There is no fee. The trainer has all the costs associated with training, vehicles, feed, vet, all that sort of stuff. And what happens is whatever he generates in prize money, the owner gets 50%, he gets 50%. So it sort of puts the emphasis on the trainer to get out there and earn the dollars for the dog, for him. Now, the leading trainer in Australia at the moment would probably be Graham Bate. I would think last year he made between $2.5 to $3 million in training.
In training alone,
Yeah.
from his percentage out of the prize money.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. That's the type of figures that we couldn't even imagine over here. I mean, you took our top races. last year 120,000 for winning the Derby.
Yeah, well, as I say, the Melbourne Cup's just gone up, and I think it's 350,000 to win, 100,000 for a second. I think third is 50,000. Plus all the unplaced starters get a few dollars as well, and then the heats leading into that, and you've got to run through a series to get to that, and they have preludes and then the semi-finals before they go to the final. I think the semi-finals are worth $10,000 each to win.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, that's unreal. It's mind-boggling.
The news. Look, I've been in the industry long enough, and I've seen the ups and downs. At the moment, the industry's on a high over there, and it's all coming from Greyhounds are the product that's the flavour of the month with the punter, because it's a fast race, it's regular, it's got 8 starters, it's visual, it's all colour coded with the rugs, and this is the betting companies over there are saying this is the product that people want. And our turnover's gone to 22%. And I would say, if we were given a fair chance in Australia, we could actually achieve 30 or 40% of the turnover without much trouble.
And what about obviously that, again? I'm not sure that we could work it in the same soccer here and football betting obviously, and horse racing betting would be way ahead of greyhound racing, and I'm afraid that anybody involved would be scared to move to that sort of model. But how much do you get? Do you get a lot of sponsorship? I know obviously the TAB crowd have to supply obviously most of the money because they're paying for the rights to show the racing. But do you get outside sponsorship as well?
Yeah. Well, I don't know the figure on it, but there are sponsors sponsoring racing events all the time. One of the largest ones is a pet food mob down there called Macro Meats, and they actually do a lot of sponsorship for several feature races around Australia, not just in Victoria, but in New South Wales and South Australia as well.
So what you're saying is it would be a very good idea for somebody from the board here in Ireland to go over, have a look and see how it works, and see would it be something that we could move towards.
Yeah, I think the thing that I'd be looking at is greyhounds in Australia are self-sufficient. They do not get funds from the government. What they get is what they earn, their percentage from the off-course betting. And not only that, the government makes money out of it. They get their percentage as well. So I can't see why our model wouldn't work in another country, but it'd be a very hard thing to try and get the politicians and everyone to say, yeah, let's try this, you know. I do understand that.
Yeah, but you'd almost be changing the way of life. It seems over here it's the way, from what I'm hearing, from what you're telling me, is that it's almost run entirely as a business, not for any entertainment value apart from for those people standing inside in the betting shop. I mean it's a social scene for us a lot of the time. Obviously we like to punt or we like to whatever, but it's a social scene. That's basically what greyhound racing is, and obviously I love, because there isn't at the moment anyway, there isn't a big return. It's very difficult to get a return out of greyhound racing.
Yeah, no, I agree. With your model here, it's a day out and it's social, but it is in Australia too, and it doesn't really mean that both models couldn't work together. It doesn't mean that if you've got an off-course betting people can't go to the races, they still can. What it does mean that if you're in a pub or a club or at home and you can't get to the races, you can still punt at those locations. You don't have to be on course to do it. Now you've got your betting shops now, like we used to in Australia. We used to call them TAB outlets, and you used to have to go to them to have a bet. But now you don't need to. You've got phone accounts, you've got everything else. But a percentage of every dollar that's turned over goes back to the racing industry, and that's what keeps the racing industry going. And
is that easily regulated?
It's a government regulation, yeah. It's a law. So they have to pay it.
So it's constant. Obviously, while the demand, as you said, is 22% turnover, that can increase. So while there's a demand for greyhound racing, the money will be there to keep the model going as it is.
Well, it's increasing. It's increasing because what's happening is the percentage is going up, and as the percentage goes up, there's more money coming back to the racing industry, to the greyhounds rather. The greyhounds can either put more meetings on or increase prize money. Either way, it attracts more people into the industry. And the more people that become involved in the industry, the bigger the turnover gets to get. So it's spiralling up.
So is it a good lifestyle at the lower level? And what I mean by that is you've obviously got a lot of people working for you, and I presume similarly for a lot of people around the country. Is there a genuine, like, a good wage in it for the lower people who are working in the kennels, or is it a passion again?
No, well, we've got an award now, for a federal award for horse and greyhound racing award, which covers all employees. There's a standard set by the federal government that they must get. You cannot pay them below. That's against the law to pay them lower than that. So we've got a standard that they have to be paid just as if they were a carpenter or a plumber or a bricklayer. So they still get paid the federal award rate.
It's obviously quite attractive to trainers in Ireland at the moment. We've had a few people who've gone out there, have set up. We've got one of our leading trainers has been out there just for the last month to have a look at it. Is it something you think will attract Irish trainers in and out, or has it done so from trainers around the world?
Well, I assume you're talking about Dolores Reid.
Dolores has been there. Tom O'Donovan has set up there. He went out, I think, before the Derby last year, maybe around that time, Derby 2011. He's set up and seems to be flying at the moment.
Dolores was at our place only a week ago, and I think she's doing a deal with one of the prominent trainers in Victoria to ship dogs down there. And I think what is going to happen is that probably it'll be a thing that the greyhound people here have to do out of necessity. If they can't generate enough income where they are, they're going to have to shift their product to somewhere that they can generate income from.
And do you think, is it somewhere that Irish trainers could break into themselves by going down and setting up?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the only thing with the Victorian model is it is so good that it is attracting all the best dogs from the nation and now from other countries. So the competition is really hard. So you can't take a substandard greyhound there and think that you're going to do good. You can't have a substandard trainer go there. You've got to really be switched on to get in and have a go.
Victoria is our Shelbourne Park.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
But so what I'm picking up from that is that the different states are different. Are they run differently?
Yeah, roughly. Yeah, Victoria is the better state to be in at the moment. Yeah.
But are they not all on the same model? Obviously,
they're all on the same model, but they don't pay all the same prize money. Victoria has a slightly better percentage return than the other states, so they're putting more into prize money.
So is that decided individually in terms of each state makes their own decision about how much they put back into it?
No, it's a bit complicated. But what happened is, where we had TABs, or they were called totaliser agency boards, in all the states, they've been privatised. They were set up by government. They were privatised, and in the privatisation in New South Wales, the greyhounds locked themselves into 13.2% of the take for the next 80 or 90 years, which was a silly move. But what's happened is their percentage has actually moved to 20%, but they're locked into 13.2%.
Okay.
So they're not getting the same return that Victoria is. Victoria is on market share, so as their share goes up, their income goes up. So that's why they are on top at the moment, because they're getting all this extra money from the deal they originally did.
So they will catch up eventually.
Well, hopefully, yeah.
yeah. You seem to have it all sorted there. Give us your reason for coming over here.
Come over here because Australia being an island continent, our quarantine is very strict on getting greyhounds in from any other country. And I think to get a greyhound in from Ireland the procedure is 7 or 8 months. And I've been using frozen semen to access the better genetic pools in greyhounds internationally. I brought it in from America and Ireland before, but I've only ever used track dogs in Ireland. And what I want to do as an experiment is try some very good coursing blood and try and see what benefits I get out of that in our breeding program. So that's what I'm here for, to check out the coursing scene here.
We had a little chat about this earlier on. Again, there might be an issue. Obviously, one of the biggest issues with coursing dogs is their size-wise. They're a lot bigger. I mean, there was a dog running in Clonmel at the national meeting, just a weekend there, £108. I mean, that's not viable for the
No,
track.
not for track dog, not for track dog. But what I'm looking at doing is, if I'm able to cross a coursing dog with an Australian track bitch, obviously not being the same size, I'll bring the size down a little. And if I'm able then to get some good females out of that cross, I will then cross her back to an Australian dog. So I'll bring the size down over 2 or 3 generations, but still have the outcross coming through from that original cross with a coursing dog.
So the purpose is to, as much as you possibly can, depending on how it works, to freshen up what you have.
Exactly, yeah. The coursing dog, through what I can see with a few days here, is a total different line to the track dog. So where I've been using Australian females with US and Irish track dogs, I'm bringing in a completely different line again, and I'm hoping to spark it up again. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a certain toughness about the coursing dogs. Like as a top coursing trainer said to me a couple of weeks ago, you can bring a dog to the track, run around once, and come back again next week. But with the coursing, you might have to run up, get a hunt for the same time up the top of a field, and have to go back up again an hour later. So you've got a degree of toughness that you'd hope that would be something that would come across in the breed.
Yeah, well, I saw that yesterday with the coursing dogs when they had to run up the field 2 or 3 times, especially if they had a hard run. Like they've got to back up an hour later, and that's a tough dog. That's a real tough dog doing that sort of thing. Like your track dog, as you said, track dog will put in a run, a real good run, and then he won't run again for another week. So he's got a week spell. But to run 3 hard runs in succession, that's a super hard effort, a top effort. You know? You've
been here, obviously, you said to me you were here about 15 years ago. It's changed a lot in the meantime. What have you seen the differences since you've arrived back?
Oh, I think the major difference is the people are so depressed in the industry, and that's a little sad. You know, there's a lot of really nice, good people in the greyhound industry here, and to see them so depressed is a little disappointing, to tell you the truth.
And what can we do to change it?
Well, I don't know. Not knowing how the industry's financed here, somehow they've got to receive. They've got to receive a return for the effort and financial investment they're putting into the industry, and unfortunately I don't think that's happening at the moment.
Yeah, it's probably something that we don't, well, like you said, a lot of people are depressed about it at the moment, but it's something we probably don't see in the immediate future. It's a matter of keeping the game ticking over, I suppose, for the moment, and then hope that something will turn, or try to make something turn.
Yeah, I hope it does, yeah. You know, like, Ireland traditionally has been the home of greyhound racing. It's been here forever. Where Australia is sort of in the last 100 years and America probably 150 years. So we all look upon Ireland as the hub and the home of greyhound racing, and it would certainly be sad for it to disappear.
Yeah, like one of the benefits, people will say it's a noose, but one of the benefits of the good times, the boom times that we had here is that we have great facilities, and I think you're going to find it very hard to convince the board and the government to move away from that. And what I mean by that is go to your model whereby we turn into a bag system, bags just being bookmakers, basically funded by bookmakers. You're going to have a very hard time to convince people to go to that model. It might be the only option.
Well, it's either that or have a system where a percentage of all money turned over by bookmakers has to go back to the code of racing that it's gambled on. So I believe there's very little money that goes from the bookmakers back to the racing industry over here. I don't know exactly how it works, but that's what I'm being told, where we've got it legislated that a percentage of that turnover has to go back to support the product. Like, let's face it, if you haven't got an industry, you haven't got bookmakers. So it's really up to the bookmakers, through the punters, etc., to keep the industry growing, to keep a product there. And if you haven't got the product there, you haven't got bookmakers, you haven't got anything.
Well, a lot of people believe that the system in Australia is that it's all TAB, but you tell me that there are on-course bookmakers, it's just that they actually have died out, basically, or are dying out because of the system.
Yeah, there's not a lot of on-course bookmakers now because the patronage isn't there. But you got to remember, our country's so large that we can be sitting in our lounge rooms on the east coast of Australia watching races from 3,000 miles away, live, and if we want we can have a bet on them, which is an impossibility if you're going to try and be on course. You just can't get the patronage from such a large country from one end to the other. Probably if the government were interested to try and make the industry self-sufficient here, they could have a look at how gambling is legislated down in Australia and how or what percentage is taken out to keep the racing industry going. And maybe they could adopt that model. Now, I'm sure the bookmakers wouldn't like it. But long term, if someone doesn't realise there's got to be money coming from somewhere to keep the product going, there won't be a product, and then the whole thing's gone. Bookmakers and everything.
Bookmakers and the whole lot, yeah. Is there,
What is the TAB? Is it a bookmaking firm the same as Ladbrokes?
It's tote. It's basically tote. It's tote. But
Now, Paddy Powers are going over to Australia, right? Are they betting on dogs, or what are they actually betting on?
There's quite a few corporates coming over there. Our original model was the TAB, Totaliser Agency Board. That was set up by our state governments. And what's happened is they grew to a size where one sort of swallowed the other, and it also but in the last 5 years they've actually got the corporates coming in, Betfair, Ladbrokes, and there's smaller corporates setting up. But what's happened is there was a legal case just recently in Australia, and it was confirmed that the race fields and the form was owned by that particular code of racing. And if the corporates wanted to use that race fields legislation, they had to pay, I think, a 1.5% of their turnover to that code of racing. So what happens is it doesn't matter if it's the TAB or the corporates now, and even if Ladbrokes come in, if they want to use the race field information, they are going to have to pay to that code of racing that amount of money.
Now, Australia and America both have 8 dog races, right? We have 6. Surely that's a massive disadvantage to a tote system if we tried selling that product worldwide or anything.
Yeah, you might be right. You might be right. When I was on the Greyhound Racing Authority in New South Wales in 2000, and the TAB used to come into us, and they used to give us different models which were a disadvantage to the punter, and one of those was if there was less than 8 dogs racing. So what happens is the smaller the field, the less turnover, and the greater the distance, the better the turnover. So if you run a distance race, which was 700 metres, it would turn over more money than a 400 metre race. So there are factors in there that do affect the turnover. I don't know how that would impact here.
How many racetracks are there in Australia?
How many racetracks?
Yeah.
Altogether?
Roughly.
I think there's about a dozen in Victoria. There'd be probably 30 in New South Wales. In Queensland they got 2 or 3 all up. At a guess we'd probably have 60 or 70 tracks.
Sure.
But what's happening there is as time goes on, I think we'll find that there'll be less tracks conducting more races, because the overheads of keeping all the complex going is becoming too expensive. So they'll actually, you might see the numbers of tracks shrink, but the number of programs improve. So we'll be running 2 or 3 times a week out of one complex.
Yeah, well, see, that's what I was thinking, trying to market onto Ireland. I was thinking along the same lines of, I mean, our tracks, they all wouldn't survive. I mean, even if we had the same system, there wouldn't be the demand for every track. I mean, we could have 6 or 7 tracks run the same night. I mean, that's, you know, there's no point in having racing on at the same time if it's going out to TAB or to betting shops. I mean, they don't want them on at the same time. They want them spaced out. They want them, you know, they want them run as a system.
Usually what happens for them to come in, they have to fit into a time slot with the TAB agencies. They don't want them running at the same time. But now what's happened is there's so many meetings running in Australia, they've actually got 2 racing stations, Sky 1 and Sky 2. So you can actually alternate between stations because you've got 2 programs running at one time.
So that has to be commercially viable, or else the smaller tracks will basically be let go. They won't be included in it, I suppose. I presume at the moment what has to happen is that the money that comes in, the funding that comes in, has to be spread between all the tracks.
The funding that comes into the authority in each state. So in Victoria, for argument's sake, there's 12 or 13 tracks. The money will actually come into the Greyhound Racing Authority in that state, and then they disperse it to the tracks. So that's how the model works down there. Now in New South Wales, the same thing. The money will actually come into the Greyhound Racing Authority in New South Wales, and it is dispersed amongst the tracks by that authority. That authority in that state is the managers of greyhound racing in that state. So it's a little complex, but it does work.
But it gets handed out in different percentages. So obviously there will be some kind of lower grade. You said there were 4 grades of tracks. Is that right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Our city tracks race for about $5,000 for win. Our tab tracks race for about $1,400, and then our C grade or country tracks are racing for about $500. So there's different standards of track. And in some states, the city track doesn't pay as much as the bigger states. The biggest states in Australia, the eastern states, which is Victoria, Queensland, New South Wales and Queensland. South Australia is one of the lesser tracks, one of the lesser states population-wise, and their city meeting races for about $1,500 a race. But at their track too, they've got more than one grade of meeting on that track, so they might race 4 nights a week out of the one complex, but they might have an A grade meeting one night, a B grade meeting the other night, and a C grade meeting the other night, and they vary prize money accordingly on those nights.
Yeah, we were at a point probably, you know, during the boom times there 10, 15 years ago, I suppose we were at a point where you could go to a track, with a bigger track certainly, and get €1,000 for winning a race, a one-off race, but now you might have to go up against 24, 23 other dogs to race for that sort of money. We're in a difficult situation. I'm not sure how we're going to.
No, I don't know. I don't know the ins and outs of your industry here, and certainly, even though it all sounds good in Australia, we have our problems. Don't worry, we've still got our problems that we've got to try and sort out. But at the moment, through what I can see here, the major difference between the 2 countries is we've got a viable model down there, and you fellas are struggling up here.
Yeah, I'm just concerned that with the size of the population, the size of the island, attracting the money in the first place. I mean, there's competition. If you're talking about going out to the internet to betting shops, you've got the competition from England for the meetings. I mean, if it's not about, if the importance isn't on the quality of the racing and just getting a product out there, well, then you've got a lot of competition from England. If it's about high class racing, that might be something different.
Yeah, I think the major problem you've got here is your bookmakers aren't. A percentage isn't being taken out of the betting dollar to prop up the product that's being put on. And somehow you'd have to have a look at whether the government is interested in bringing in a model. Now, everything could stay the same in this country, but if there was a racefields legislation in this country, the same as it is in Australia, you could have exactly what you've got now, but they'd all have to pay 1.5% to use that field information, and it wouldn't matter whether people are gambling from England. I would assume that what would happen is if the bookmakers in England wanted to use the racefields legislation, then they would have to agree to pay the percentage. Otherwise, they don't get the racefields information.
Yeah, we have some racing going out now, but again, of course, it's not shown live in Ireland because of the challenge of well, the problem of losing people from actually going to the tracks. I mean, as I said, we have very good facilities, and the last thing they want to do is to kind of neglect them now after putting investing so much money in them. It's a huge challenge. But the problem again is that there would only be a demand for the better tracks. I mean, the bookmakers wouldn't be interested in most of the smaller tracks around the country. Interested in the racing there, showing it.
Yeah, well, I don't know. That'd be something that Ireland would have to address. I've got no idea on that. I just know how our model works and how we generate income, you know. And even though the TAB down in Australia might get cover a smaller meeting, even if they it turns over 1/10 of our metropolitan meetings, it's still generating money.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's still generating turnover.
Something.
And it's still generating something. So I don't know that the bookies would want to say, no, we're not going to touch that track at all. I've got no idea whether that would work or not. It'd certainly be an interesting exercise for the officials and the government from here to have a look at Australia. I'm not saying it could work. All I'm saying is that's the way it works for us, and that's what keeps the product going. Without sufficient funds coming in to keep the product going, I can see that the population of greyhounds will shrink, the number of people will shrink, and the industry will keep going down. And that's exactly what happened in New South Wales in the 80s. And without adequate return coming in for the investment in greyhounds, either the work or the investment in setting up the facilities to have the greyhounds, they just won't. You just can't put the money and effort into it, you know.
And what sort of audience does it attract? Obviously, it's not big, but the bigger nights, the likes of the Melbourne Cup.
Oh, for us down there, Melbourne Cup, they might get 8,000 or 10,000 people on a big night.
You say you don't go to that many meetings anymore. Is that just?
Well, a lot of the race meetings that I'm in are 3,000 miles away, and I just can't get there, you know. So what I've got to do is watch most of them, and if we qualify and get to a feature race, I'll do my best to get there for that night, you know.
But you run it as a business. That's all.
Well, that's the way it started as a hobby, and the hobby grew bigger and bigger until I actually left school and started working on the dogs before my father did. And then 12 months later, he left work, and the hobby just grew and grew until it got a business. And once it gets to a business, you've got to work it like a business. And as I said, we had to Americanise our system and change things around, and it's probably worked better than I thought it would.
And what's your greatest achievement in greyhound racing so far?
Oh, we qualified for 7 out of the 8 starters in the Melbourne Cup the year before last.
11, yeah.
And then we finished in the final 1-7. So we're lucky there too.
Where do you go from there?
Have you any targets you set yourself year on year, or is it you know, obviously this is what you're doing now over here to trying to introduce a coursing bred into the line. Is there something else? Are you looking years down the line?
I'm always looking years down the line. My father was a very good teacher, and he told me always to look into the future as much as you can. And what I'm doing with the coursing blood isn't looking at what I can do the next generation, but perhaps 2 or 3 generations down the line. So I'm not looking at, well, I've sort of split our breeding into 2 lots. I've split half our breeding into trying to produce race dogs, and the other half I'm looking at reproduction females down the line. So I've split our breeding into 2 halves, really.
So the introduction, you know, it mightn't work the first time, but if you continue to make it work, basically, is what you're.
Well, if I ended up achieving a female by a coursing dog, by mating a coursing dog to an Australian track dog, and if I ended up with a female that was say 75 pound, which is too big for a track female, but she was able to get through to perhaps contest some bottom grade races on our metropolitan tracks. There's still got to be pretty good dogs to do that. Then I'll bring her back and then breed her back to a track dog again, and perhaps bring the size down again and get something out of her.
A lot of the breeders here in Ireland, the bigger breeders certainly, they don't tend to race their bitches. are very, very little indeed. I mean, it's not for the bitches themselves proving it. There's a theory here, which whether it's realistic or not, that over racing a bitch is not a good thing for the breeding line. Would you concur with that?
No, I think the reverse. Some of our better females have been females that have raced 100 race starters, never had a problem reproducing, and been real good reproducers. And I've noticed the same thing in the US as well.
And have you noticed anything different about you've probably been in a few kennels here, I suppose, since you've been over. Have you noticed anything different about the way they work compared to at home?
No, not really. No. A lot of our more prominent trainers over there don't walk dogs at all. It's all free running. So what they do is they let their racing dogs out to run rather than walking them. So that's probably the biggest difference, yeah.
So it's, the work is in the galloping, and there's no.
Yeah, for argument's sake, well, with us, we've got our pre-trainers kennelled or housed in groups of 6, and we'll let that group of 6 dogs out together in an exercise paddock. We'll walk down and back with them, and they'll all tear up and down. So by the time you bring them in their boot, they go away, and you get the next 6 out, and away you go and do that.
You're making it sound easy.
No.
Yeah.
I'll have to book me a ticket to Australia. What's next?
Go home and start working on the farm.
Keep it going.
Yeah, that's right. Keep it going. See if we can keep up. We've had a couple of enormous years, and I'm very proud that the family's been able to achieve what they have. And I'm hoping that we can keep that level of racing going. But I've been in racing long enough that you're up and down like a yo-yo, so I don't get too excited about what we're doing. I just hope we can keep it going, you know.
And what are the challenges?
To try and keep producing the quality dog that we've been doing. Like our kennel complex now stretches over 300 acres, and we've got staff from one end to the other and vehicles running around and all that sort of deal. And we go through about 4 tonne of meat a week. So to keep that sort of operation going, it's large overheads, and you got to you got the tiger by the tail. You can't let go. You got to keep going. So we cook up now. We were at Dumfries, and they don't feed bones to their dogs. We feed a lot of bones to our dogs. They're chewing on bones all the time. They don't believe in feeding mutton. I believe the Irish are against. We've had no problem feeding mutton at all.
Right.
And one of the biggest things, and probably people don't like this, but we feed a lot of kangaroo.
Yes.
Because actually, where I am, kangaroos are a plague proportion, and they've got to cull them, you know. Cars running in, kangaroos have gone through windscreens of vehicles and killed people, so they're that much of a sort of a pest at the moment over there, that they use quite a bit of it for pet food. Pet food like meat is the same, depending on the quality and the volume. Like when we buy meat in, we've got a freezer that holds 100 tonne, so we bring it in semi-trailers, and being able to do that,
Yes.
I can store 2 or 3 months worth of food in there, and I can bring it straight off the wholesaler. So the more hands it goes through,
Yes.
it increases in price. So we get it at a reasonable price because of the volume that we purchase it in, you know.
And what number of dogs are bred in Australia every year? Like, what sort of numbers would be registered? Or
I'm not sure. I think it's about 3,000 or 3,500 litres a year, something like that.
And do they race longer in Australia? Like, what's the average age when they finish racing in Australia?
3 to 3.5.
Something similar.
Yeah.
And have you been racing here? How do you compare the top Australian to the top Irish? Or
Australians are a pretty funny group of people. They think everything's best in Australia.
we do
And-
too.
Yeah, well, it might be Greyhound people in general, but what happened is, in my travels, what I've seen is the best countries for Greyhounds are Ireland, Australia and the US. And if I were to rate them I'd probably say if you put the best Irish, American and Australian dogs together, you'd probably find the Irish would be in front at the first turn. And they would probably lead to 300 or 400 metres, and then the Australian and the American dog would overtake them, and once they got to 5 or 550 metres, the American dog would run right over top of us. So the American dog is a lot stronger dog because of the way they race. The Irish dog needs a lot of early pace because your tracks are smaller than ours. So ours are sort of in between. So that's the way I'd rate them. But really, the quality of your dog in each one of those countries, the good quality dogs, there's not much in it. There's very little.
And are there any Irish sires in Australia that you're using continually on your bitches at the moment, or?
I've used quite a few. I'm breeding with some droopy Maldinis, some droopy Viris. So they're females that have raced well on the track, and they're coming back for breeding now into the breeding farm. So we've got quite a few that I've used, yeah. I've got quite a few now that are actually a combination of Australian, US and Irish. So I've got the three countries combined in one greyhound, and they're very good greyhounds too. Doing something like that's worked out real good.
And have you any, like with so many dogs, you must have stud dogs in Australia. Had any of them have a presence in Ireland, or?
Not at this stage, but I've had a Group 1 winner. A dog won a race down there worth $150,000. A dog called David Bale. And he was only a young dog, and he won the race. And lo and behold, the next start he broke a hock. And we've got him there, and I'm just negotiating to send him over to Sean Burke. I think he'd be very interesting to cross with the Irish Lions now. He's bringing in bloodlines Australian bloodlines that there's not a lot of.
What way is he bred?
He's a Bartram Bale out of, I don't know, I can't remember.
100 bitches.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the dog is actually coming, not the semen. The actual dog will come.
Yeah, well, it takes 6 or 8 months to get the dog over here. So what the plan of attack is we're going to send over a consignment of semen, so the dog can start off, and then the dog will follow behind that. Yeah. But he could be quite exciting to see how he crosses with the
And
Irish
is
dog.
it not as difficult to get the semen over as the dog? Is it not the same amount of time that's
No.
needed?
No. Apparently, all you've got to do is a health check on the dog, a vet's health check.
There's no rabies in Australia. No.
No. And then you can ship the semen, but the dog, it's quite a lot more complex to get the dog over here himself. So
Yeah.
we'll get some semen over and see how it goes from there. You know?
And is it you're looking for the coursing line here? Is that because there's a lot of Australian breeding in the Irish lines now anyway? So it's probably quite difficult to find a pure Irish bred at the moment. Is that the coursing lines are obviously strong Irish?
Yeah, and they're lines that I haven't seen much of in the track dogs.
Right.
So it's sort of a different. It's almost like saying you've got Australia, American Ireland, and then you've got another country.
Yeah.
The bloodlines
Yeah.
with your coursing dog is a totally different line again. So I'm trying to bring that in to see just what happens with it. You know?
There's a clearly defined line. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
There's a
it.
little bit of it in Ireland at the moment. I mean, Central City was a track dog who won the coursing derby there a couple of years ago, and he's bred to track bitches and to coursing bitches. So I suppose there will be a little bit of a mix in Ireland now. But that's very, very unusual. I mean, I haven't heard of that in the past, to be honest.
Yeah, well, when I started crossing our females with the American blood, everyone said I was nuts, and it worked really well. And then when I started doing the same thing with Irish, they thought I'd gone nuts again. But everyone's trying to do exactly what we've done now. The exchange of genetics through frozen semen throughout the world now, it's going all over the place. And you see that here with all the frozen semen from. And I believe, haven't you got an American dog here at the moment that's doing quite well? An American bred dog that's at stud?
Kinloch Bray, I suppose. Is it Kinloch Bray?
Yeah.
Okay, right, yeah, he's...
So he's come over, but that's an outcross coming over to to Ireland
Yeah.
that's kicking off and going well. So there's an exchange of genes throughout the whole greyhound world now, you know. And it's just something that I've often thought of with the coursing dog, but never got around to it.
You like the idea of an outcross then?
Yeah, I think the best cross in Australia is a distance female by outcross back to an Australian colonial sire sprint dog. And at the moment we've got some real good females there by Sonic Flight. And one of them was, in her day, she was the distance champion in Australia. And I've bred her back to colonial Australian size and it's been terrific.
And is there a specific area in Australia in terms of distance that you're better at? You know what I mean? Ireland, we don't tend to concentrate on sprinters. We just don't. I mean, our distance dogs even. It's
But what distance is your sprint?
Our sprint we're talking about between 300 and 400 yards.
Now what we call a sprint over there 520 metres. A middle distance a middle distance is 620 metres and a distance is 720 metres.
Okay.
All right, and we haven't, but there is a distance bitch in Australia at the moment who is the top distance runner, a bitch called Miata. And she's based in WA, and to date she's earned something like 520,000 on the track. Yeah. And we think, or everyone in the doggy world thinks at the moment, she could possibly break the all-time prize money of 620,000. She's going that well. She's just unbelievable. Young bloke's got it too, a fellow by the name of Paulie Stewart, and he did a fantastic job with it.
So you're saying that if we had an outstanding sprinter here, he wouldn't be any appeal to you?
Not a short course dog. It'd be too short for us. Too short. We need something that can run at least a 520 or 515.
So the Melbourne Cup, what distance is that over then?
That's on the two Melbourne tracks are either 515 or 520. So you're still around that 520 mark.
So what's that? 575, was it?
Yeah, about that 10%. About 10%. About 575.
Mm.
And it's just 4 bends. It's a long straight to the first bend.
I think our bends might be sort of larger radius than yours.
Right.
You know, but the straights are about the same. But they start at the end of one straight, around past the boxes, and then finish at the end of that straight again.
And is it like the Americans where they come up a slip road almost off at the track?
No. No, the boxes are right on the track. Your one box is in line with the rail, but you imagine with 8 boxes, well, we haven't got the system where you've got where you lift the boxes off the track. The boxes are actually set up in line with the running rail, back off the track a little bit. So I suppose there is a little bit of a shift.
It's like the American system then, the trap stay there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, we call them boxes, but the boxes are stationary in one position all the time.
Right.
Yeah. But we got 3 main distances, as I say.
Yeah.
And those distances are 520, 620, 720 metres.
So, okay,
That's what I was saying to you before about the difference between the 3 countries.
Yeah.
Where you've got your shorter distance, your dogs are quicker earlier than ours. So you in Ireland, you would have the quickest dogs early in the world, up to about 400, and then the other nations that start.
So when you're looking at bringing in coursing, breeding, where the coursing, you're talking about their fast dogs, short course, but they're tough and they have stamina. They'll go back and do it again. I mean, you're not breeding for long distance there.
Well, I don't know. My experience is if you line breed 2 lines together, 2 sprinting lines together, you'll decrease the strength of the offspring. But if you cross two greyhounds together that are both sprinting dogs, that are totally unrelated, you usually increase the stamina.
Okay.
Now, I can't tell you why, but that's what's happened in our pipeline. So if I take one of your coursing dogs and put it with one of our sprinting greyhounds, I'm assuming I'll easily get the 520, maybe 620 out of it.
And how big is your test going to be? And what I mean by that is like how many bitches are you going to breed?
No, I won't go overboard with it, but what I'll do is I'll probably get the semen to 2 or 3 different sizes, perhaps 3 different sizes, and do a litter to each one of them each year for 2 or 3 years and see what happens.
And have you pinned that down yet? What sires they'll be?
I got a bit of an idea, yeah.
Any hints? No.
Adios Onslow,
Oh, Alonso, yeah.
Yeah.
Kyle James,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I don't know if I'll be able to get it, but what's the other dog? Is it Razor?
Razor
Ashburn.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So those 3 dogs I think would be pretty interesting. Now I don't know if I can get them all at this stage. I'm just sort of negotiating with the people, but I think they would be 3 reasonably proven size to have a go with this.
Certainly.
Yeah. Well, the thing about the coursing dog is they're running. We actually time them. We actually time them from the time the slipper let them go, the average time, and we worked it out that they're running about 450 metres.
Okay.
Now, for them to do that 2 or 3 times in one day, they've got to be a pretty tough dog.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
You know, they've got to be real tough. I remember an old story years ago where some people down in Sydney, this is years back, where they were trying to have a punt on a dog, and this dog was odds-on favourite every day. Every time they started, it was odds-on favourite. So they thought, we've got to get some bad form on this dog. So they got a rowboat in the Sydney Harbour, and they rowed around Sydney Harbour with this poor dog swimming behind it for about an hour. And then they put it in the race that night, and they thought, you know, this dog used to win by half the length of the straight all the time, you know, so they put it in the race, tried to get some bad form, and it still won by only half the length of the straight. So it still backfired on it, you know.
Yeah.
There's a call here. There's been an issue here where it's supposed to be after 2 years after the dog has died that you're not allowed to use the semen anymore. Where would you stand on that?
I don't agree with it. I think that some dogs die prematurely, and in a lot of cases, frozen semen on a dog is done as an insurance policy against that dog. And for breeders who want to keep their line going, they can have frozen semen put up. And say, for argument's sake, in Australia, and we have a terrible time with snakes. Say, for argument's sake, we had a 6-year-old dog, and we put some frozen semen up, and the dog got bitten by a snake and killed. At 8 years old, we've got to get rid of it 2 years later. Now, if the dog lived his natural life, he might live till 10 or 12. So if you have a 2-year rule in place, you're stopping something that might have been natural from not happening.
And what's the impact then on the breeding line? Is it do you feel there might be too much of one line, or will it you know, bringing in the next generation of sires, is that an issue, or you know, to prove a young dog?
Yeah, in America they've been doing it for 20 years longer than everywhere else, and they've got no restrictions whatsoever. Haven't had a problem. And in Australia we've got a restriction where you can only make 54 per quarter. But you'll always find the bloodlines will change, and with frozen semen, genes will come from another country and spark things up, and I don't think it's an issue at all. In fact, I think it's the best thing that's ever happened with greyhounds and breeding.
And so let's compare it to thoroughbred racing, where they can't. There is no such thing as frozen semen. The horse dies for whatever reason, whatever age. Move on. Next one.
Yeah, well, as I said, with horses they might live till they're 30. You got shuttle stallions that will make 6 bitches in a day here and then shoot it off to the other hemisphere and do that. Greyhounds can't do that realistically. A greyhound can only give semen sort of every 24 hours. So the 2 species are different. In greyhounds or canines, I think we are species specific, where we've got a unique set of genetic rules that have to apply to us, and it's not the same as horses. We don't have the same lifespan and all that sort of deal that the horses do, and we've got to have a separate rule. And frozen semen has definitely been advantageous in a large country like in Australia, where you've got a country that's 3,000 miles from one side to the other. Now you're going to ship your female over here, or you're going to ship your semen over there and have it ready for the female. And it's the same with bringing genetics in from another country. we don't have the luxury of the lifespan of a greyhound to have shuttle greyhounds because of the quarantine procedures. So the best way of doing it, the most economical way of doing it, is frozen semen exchange.
And it hasn't brought up an issue where one sire is particularly successful and he's overused.
We had a dog called Temley before frozen semen come in, and Temley was the leading sire in 4 or 5 states at once. I never saw it before in my life, and I've never seen it now, especially when frozen semen's in.
Unbelievable. It's a different perspective because a lot of people here would be completely opposed to the use of frozen semen, regardless. I mean, they want an active sire. It's just a big argument that will rage here, but you're entirely on one side.
Yeah, and they go on about the quality of dog not being as good, and they're going to breed a greyhound that doesn't know how to mate naturally, and I've heard it all, but nothing like that's ever happened. I've never seen any. I mean, we breed 350 pups or 300 pups a year, around that mark. 95% of them are done in frozen semen. I think it's the best thing that's ever happened.
So you're saying there isn't a problem in the line, so that's basically down to the integrity of the breeders.
What do you mean the
Yeah,
integrity?
well, what I mean is you know they're careful with their lines, that they're not crossing too close, or it doesn't. You know.
Yeah, well, that was the same thing with natural matings. You had to decide which lines you went to there.
Oh yeah, of course. But then, like, if you have the option open to have frozen semen and beyond the lifespan of the dog, then there's a chance that it's going to appear. It's obviously going to appear more in lines.
Well, there's several things in Australia we're taxed on everything.
Yeah.
I don't know how you fellas go here, but with frozen semen, it's like an insurance policy against your dog. And also, if you're smart enough and you had a top dog, for taxation purposes, you'd spread the income of that dog over more years than the small amount. So rather than selling it all in 1 year and being taxed on it, if you spread that earnings over several years, you decrease your tax.
And do you see any situation whereby it might be an issue in a smaller area? Just like, obviously you're living in Victoria, you've got it's a massive state. We've got a small island here. We've got the sire who's overused, say, and this is a small breeding area. Do you not think that it could be an issue there?
No,
do you not have the advantage of area, population, and size?
No, I still think that you have the same issues that we do. Like, if you get a person in one end of your country to the other, you can exchange frozen semen. You can also bring frozen semen in from Australia or the US, and you've got a large export. There's probably more frozen semen going from Ireland to Australia than there is in reverse. So you fellas are coming out in front on the deal.
Very good.
And the frozen surgical, or what way is it used?
We're doing a surgical implant, but I've been here to Burke's to see how they do the scope, and I'm very interested in that. And Anne looks like she's leading the world in that. So what I'm interested to do is come back and actually spend some time with Anne and try and get her to teach me to do my own
I think
growing.
she was did something out in the States, didn't she? And that
Yeah,
Ken Bealey does all his
Yeah,
own implants.
apparently so,
and
yeah.
does
yeah.
using the scope as well.
That's right.
You wouldn't have any issue then with the quality of the semen, with natural mating, it's nature, the way they swim, it's a natural thing.
What you're saying is only the strong ones get to the eggs, right? Yeah. That's a very good theory. But what happens is the theory in frozen semen is the process of freezing and then thawing is quite extreme on the semen, and only a percentage will live through that freezing thawing process. And in my opinion, what happens is the weaker ones will not make it through the freezing thawing. So you're eliminating the weak ones in the process that natural mating would do anyway.
Right.
Now there's an extender put in the frozen. Would that not help the weak survive?
No, because what happens is, in most semen, what happens is you have a procedure where you freeze it and thaw it, and you'll even with the extender in there, you will have a loss. And for a long time they couldn't work out how to work frozen semen. And Richard Knoll in the US was able to pioneer it and get it going through the extender and the procedure of freezing it. But it still has a loss rate when it's thawed out. So the weaker ones are actually dying off in the thawing process, in my opinion.